And can I begin by thanking Deputy Lahart for introducing this piece of legislation. It recognises the decades of social and economic neglect that the North Inner City of Dublin has endured. And Fianna Fáil is no doubt acutely aware of the successive government failures to deliver the political and policy decisions necessary to tackle the embedded inequalities in this part of our city. Indeed, the Deputy's party leader was a cabinet member for 20 consecutive years and yet did nothing to address the social and economic challenges of the inner city. In that time, no bright light was shone on the intergenerational poverty, unemployment and blockages to education experienced day and daily. There was no dogged, ongoing commitment to radically change the outcomes for children and their families. Let's imagine the positive, life-changing interventions that could have been delivered for this community over the course of 2 decades. That said, the bill is a welcome, albeit belated, recognition by the Deputy of his party's historic failure to grip the declining fortunes of the inner city, and hopefully signals a new and long-term commitment to transforming the lives of those who live there. There are a number of current projects and challenges within the inner city that need urgent attention, Ceann Comhairle. The regeneration of O'Devney Gardens needs to be completed without any further delay. We've yet to receive a completion date for the Croke Villas project. The Department of Justice and Dublin City Council have failed to deliver on their commitment to develop an appropriate memorial at the Sean McDermott Street site to the women who survived the Magdalen laundries. And this particular failure is truly astounding and gives an insight into the sometimes shallow response by the state when acknowledging the horrific treatment meted out to our most vulnerable women and children, very, very many of whom came from Dublin's North Inner City. Intergenerational unemployment has not been gripped, nor have the systemic, flexible approaches and supports that are absolutely required to redirect early school leavers to education and training. And whilst progress has been made at a community policing level, the impact of criminal feuds and low-level crime in the inner city continues to have a deep and detrimental effect on people's sense of security and happiness. We regularly hear from individuals and families who simply don't feel safe in their homes or in their blocks of flats or on their streets. There is, I believe, a lack of ambition and vision at government and council management for the inner city and its long-term success. And for me, the refusal of the government to engage with Dublin City Council, for example, to purchase Aldborough House, typifies this failure. If you visit any modern city, sites like Aldborough House and Sean McDermott Street's former Magdalen Laundry are creatively reimagined, often as self-financing cultural and historical sites enjoyed by locals and visitors alike. So I ask myself why it is that government at every level and their officials always seek to limit the aspirations for areas like the North Inner City. Why is the tinkering around the edges approach always favoured above deep transformative change? Why is it that they have failed to work together to deliver the radical changes that the community have cried out for? If an authority is to be established, it must never become yet another underperforming quango that fails to deliver for the long term. And that is my concern. So whereas we will enable the passage of this legislation to the next stage, we do this on the basis that if it is to progress through the House, we will submit very significant changes and amendments to the proposition. Because as it stands, it is merely a superficial nod, with all due respect, to what needs to be done in the inner city. The bill provides that the authority will deliver social and economic regeneration, improvements in areas like physical environment. It's intended that the authority will prepare a strategy for the regeneration of the area and promote investment by statutory bodies. And the spirit of these commitments is welcome, although I have to tell you, arguably, we shouldn't need a new Quango to deliver on these standard deliverables if there were a collective political will to do so. Section 5 of the bill envisages enabling the authority to dispose of land that is in the ownership of the state on completion of its development, redevelopment, renewal or conservation. And this, Ceann Comhairle, is a significant cause of concern and a provision that we could not and will not accept should the bill progress through the Oireachtas. As the Deputy knows, this bill cannot confer such a right on the authority. Even if the bill could bypass existing legislation that governs the disposal of public land, I would be surprised if Dublin City Council colleagues would support the Deputy's intention to strip them of their democratic powers in this regard. This concern is compounded by the bill's sidelining of community representation on the authority's board. This is the piece that perhaps puzzles me most. We have 6 government officials, 3 state agency representatives, 3 business representatives, and then just 3 persons from the North Inner City Coalition. I should also say that there is a glaring omission in terms of officialdom in the lack of an official from the Department of Children and Youth Affairs, and as anyone who knows the North Inner City will know well that those are absolutely critical players to have around the table. As the Deputy is no doubt aware, community leaders have called for any proposed authority to have an independent chair, and yet the legislation does not provide for this. The board doesn't include local elected representatives or indeed experts in the various fields necessary to deliver transformative public policy which is needed to address the community's embedded challenges. It's worth noting that all of the officials this legislation provides for are already working within the implementation group of the North East Inner City programme, as the Minister has said. The legislation commits to implement the recommendations of Kieran Mulvey's Dublin North East Inner City report, and I'm unsure as to why the Deputy would seek only to duplicate this same work which is ongoing. I'm concerned that the bill's limited provisions mirror the Dublin Docklands Authority Act, and let's all just recall, colleagues, that ended in tears. There were so many failures and shortcomings associated with that project. Surely any similar project should reflect the lessons learnt from the past mistakes made by the Deputy's party. Ceann Comhairle, I will work with any and all political representatives, state officials, to deliver social and economic regeneration and improvements in the North Inner City and its physical environment. However, my ambition for the community is much greater than that outlined in this bill. As a TD honoured to be elected to represent this constituency, I understand that transformative change is required to ensure that we are the last generation of TDs to raise the deeply sad and entirely avoidable social and economic inequalities that are written deep into the fabric of the North Inner City. We need to radically decrease the number of early school leavers. We need to address poverty. That's what's at the root of all of this. We need fluidity, flexibility in the delivery of all services, but in particular healthcare, and the supports necessary to extract people, to support people who are in the grip of drug addiction. Lone parents have to be supported by the state in efforts to improve their lot, be it through education, through retraining, through employment. Delivery of social and affordable housing to include cost rental homes must be ramped up, and so too must the quality of the homes within the existing stock and future developments. I'm sure Deputy Lahart knows, as I do, that too many public and private tenants are living in homes riddled with damp and mould. Tenement buildings in the year 2018. The flats are so small the children have no kitchen table to do their homework on. This is an abiding theme of mine, Ceann Comhairle. And it might sound odd at first hearing, but in a home where you have no kitchen table to do your homework, to have a meal, to have a collective gathering of the family, what is that all about in the year 2018? Teenagers and parents have no privacy. Adult children share bedrooms with their mum. Homeless families spend months and sometimes years in emergency accommodation. We also have to demand the development of cultural, creative and historic space as a staple of any future development projects. Officialdom needs to commit to an in-depth and meaningful consultation with the community in all of its parts to develop a long-term vision for the North Inner City. And that has to be more than just regeneration packages. Regeneration is an important component, but only a single component of the objective to build a safe, sustainable, vibrant and a hopeful community in the North Inner City. So the deliverables from any authority need to be properly resourced. If they're not, then all of this is just to meet the eye. It means real investment in infrastructure, in support, in people. It means a real programme to eradicate poverty. And if these types of commitments aren't hardwired into the legislation, then this will just end up being another meaningless bill delivered by a political party that felt it needed to make some kind of empty gesture politics to the people that I represent in the North Inner City. And I want to say to you, to us, that we can do better than that. Ceann Comhairle, by way of conclusion, I think James Connolly put it best, and I wish to say this on behalf of my constituents in the North Inner City. Our demands are most modest. We only want the earth. Crumbs from the table, however well-intentioned, however polished the legislative language, are simply not enough. The inner city needs investment. Investment, decent housing, decent education, flexibility in how we deliver our services, belief and hope in our people. We will give this legislation a fair wind. We're not going to block it. But I have to say, for the record, that I am not convinced that this is the panacea. I think the design, for one thing, as I've pointed out some of its flaws. But if the politics and political leadership in this chamber believes that people in the North Inner City and their advocates and community leaders will be appeased or satisfied by gesture politics and by continuing sweet rhetoric, well, then you're very wrong. We want results. We want decent homes, decent work, a decent chance, and that means a government that is prepared to invest, not through a quango, but to invest directly in all of those things, and that's the challenge for all of us.